Good day, good people. This is your personal change coach and village elder, Heather Heteru. I am so happy to be with you today to have this conversation. So we've had a few episodes around suicide, suicidal ideation, and the whole journey, my particular journey around suicide and the way that it directed my life. But I want to go back because I want to meet you in a space where I think we may have some things in common. And so our episode today for the Lessons of the Journey is really about where the journey began. And so I want us to have this perspective together because this journey it really is a spiritual, metaphysical, and physical walk into where we have been and where we're going. And so I'm kind of sharing with you my journey in hopes that it encourages you in your reflection and looking back into your meridian path to see what things are there in store for you, what treasures are in your reflections. And so I want to share with you that this particular episode is about how God can use a child. And I would be that child that we're talking about. But I also want you to reflect on these moments or similar moments in your journey where you have been used to move God's work forward in our community, in our families, in our lives. So I want to talk about where kind of I really felt like I found my voice. And at that time, I was 12 years old. And I've told this story before, but I want to use a different perspective so that people can see a little bit deeper into, again, your own journey as well, not just mine. So when I was 12 and in my neighborhood, so I grew up in Dexter, Linwood area and near Central High School. And on our block and in our community, they had started this campaign where they were cutting down our trees. So we had beautiful tree-lined streets all the way through our community. And I felt like that they who, of course, this was a city project, but I felt like that they who were coming to take our trees were taking a part of our community and it was almost like they took the protection out of our community. And I really felt that the trees were so much a part of us, a part of our community, that they had no right to come and take our trees. And so it was very infuriating to me. I watched them go from block to block, from Dexter down to Linwood. And so my block is the last block before getting to Linwood. So we were the last block that they were taking the trees down. And it was just big chainsaws and, big trucks, and they were cutting down the trees and, lifting them up and hauling them off. And it was very painful for me to watch. And, other neighbors were watching, but nobody was saying anything. And I felt like they just let them come and take our trees, like let them come and take our children, right? Take our family. And it was really emotional for me. And so I had decided that I watched them take down my neighbor's tree, and I was yelling at my neighbors, stop them, stop them, stop them. And they're like, well, it's nothing we can do. It's nothing we can do. And some people were happy to have the trees removed because they didn't want to, rake leaves anymore. They didn't want the falling branches in the wintertime, all of those kind of things. So some people had valid reasons to feel it the way they do, but I didn't think they had the right to make those choices for us. And so our house was the next house that was due to have the tree removed. And it was something in me. It was an emotion in me. It was a anger. It was you have to do something. You can't be silent. And so at that point, I ran in a house. I was trying to find something that I could use to stop and block them. And the only thing I could use was myself. And so I had tied myself. I had some rope, and I tied myself to the trees. I had the rope around the tree, and I had my hands on both sides of the rope, and I would not let go. And they, said that you're going to go to jail. They were all kinds of threats that the contractors were making against me. My parents came out and the neighbors came out, and I just refused to move. And I just refused to move. I said, you don't have a right to tear down trees. these trees were already here, and anyway, they were like, well, the trees are diseased. And I said, no, the trees don't look there. And they weren't. Some of them were not. The one in front of our house was not a diseased tree. And so we kind of went at it for maybe about an hour, and they were like, well, we can't take any more delay. So they skipped our tree and started tearing down the next trees all the way down to one before the corner. Another one of the neighbors, older neighbor, was yelling and swinging a broom, and you can't tear down this tree. So they kind of just bypassed her, and it was one more at the corner, and so they tore that down. So for the longest time, those were the only 2 trees that were on our block. And they were saying, well, we're going to plant new trees and we're going to do this. And so some new trees were eventually planted. But when those new trees were planted, it was maybe almost 15 or 20 years later before they planted any new trees. And so that particular moment was a pivotal moment in my meridian path. And our meridian path is that line of choices that we chose to go right or go left or keep straight. And so for me and my choice, I chose to go right. And for me, I was standing on the side of right because I just did not believe that they had the right to tear down trees on our block without asking us. That was one. And then secondly, and it just seemed so violent the way that they were tearing down and chopping down a tree. So it was the first time that I had stood up and allowed my voice to be heard with adults, with, even though I was afraid, I did it anyway. And it was kind of the first time that I remember being afraid and standing up anyway. And so I was proud. My parents stood by me. They said, well, if she's going to fight for it, she's going to fight for it. Like they were sharing that with the contractors. So they stood by me, and my parents have always stood by me when I made choices. When I felt that way or that strongly about something, my family was always standing with me. Even whether they agreed or not. Now, my parents may not agree. They may not have agreed, but they were supportive of me. And they gave me the space to make that decision and make that choice. And so that was the choice I made. But from that choice, I made a series of other choices. So I was 12 then. Probably the next major decision I made was kind of one of my first jobs. I worked as a lunch aide in my middle school. And that was another major choice because I found myself being a servant anyway, meaning that I always wanted to help and I always wanted to serve others. And I knew that very young because that's how I felt about my family. So as I continued on that journey, when I had the opportunity, and it came out of one day the students had kind of a lunchroom fight, and it was food and everywhere. And some students, cleaned up around their area. Some students didn't. But because I had pride in my school, and I went to Durfee Middle School. So I had pride in my school. And I believed that, one, we shouldn't have been having a food fight. I was not involved in that because I don't get involved in foolishness. Never have. And so when the food fight broke out and somebody had to be responsible. Somebody had to do something, and somebody had to do something different. So I took it upon myself, and I just started cleaning up. I asked other people to help. Some people did, but then they went to class. I still stayed until, until the lunchroom team was like, you can go ahead and go to class. They're like, you should work with us, And I was like, the students can work with, in the lunchroom? And they were like, yeah. So by that time, they said, I think they had some permits or permissions. They couldn't give you a paycheck, but they could give you a stipend. And so I cleaned up. And so every day after I finished my lunch and I was chatting with my friends, I would help to make sure that all the lunch trays, this is when we had those cardboard lunch trays, all the lunch trays were put away. And it gave me a sense of pride. It filled that sense of wanting to have an identity, wanting to have a purpose, wanting to have a meaning, wanting to be a part of something important. And it seems such a small thing, but when food is stuck on the seat where you come to sit down, it's not so small, and you ruin your clothes or you slip on the floor because it's food on the floor, all of those things. And I was thinking about those things at that time. And so I remember that was one of my first jobs. I had a paper route. I've been busy most of my life working, but just that particular decision. So, and every time I made a decision, a door opened for me. So with my stance around the tree, the door opened for me to have a paper route. So my brother and I had a paper route. And so all of our neighbors knew us. So we had a paper route from 14th, from 12th Rosa Parks all the way down to Dexter. And then we had a few customers on the other side of Dexter. But that meant that we had a chance to meet all of the adults and families, because everybody always had either Detroit News or Free Press. And we made some good money, for young people, made good money. That was when my brother was it was both of our paper routes, so we worked it together. And so holidays, Christmas, our neighbors got to know us. And even when we were not delivering papers and we were just kids running on the street, they recognized us. They looked out for us. And so that stance that I took with the tree opened the door for the paper routes. And from the paper route, I got to know my neighbors in a way that I didn't expect to know them before. And the word about me, being the tree huggers, started to circulate because I stood up about the trees. So that opened doors in that way for me. And it also helped me to understand, or at least start to shape my identity and my sense of self. And so as I went on into high school, some things followed me into high school, but I was always active, but I was always, and you can ask all of my classmates, I was always very different. I was different in my style of dress. I was different in my mindset and how I thought. And so even into high school, I took my service and my servant mentality with me. I was very involved and active in middle school and in high school. So, high school is the big next step. And so I had a brother and I had a sister in high school already when I got there. And so it was very difficult following in their shadow. So my sister was, she was a track star. She also played soccer. When the sports just started to emerge at Central. And my brother played football and, ran track too. So they were fairly popular people, but, having three people in a different grade of the same family was a big thing in our high school anyway. And so it gave me, but it's almost like when you go into high school, you almost go into a reset. You don't take the same type of confidence into high school that you had maybe when you were in middle school, or some people don't. And I didn't think of it like that. Of course, this is all hindsight. This wasn't my big plan going into high school. But when I got there, the new people that you get to meet and interact with, the amount of freedom that you have to choose your classes and to choose to go to class or not to go to class, and all the different places and spaces that people occupy. You have a choice in what you want to be involved in, the clubs and the sports programs and all of those types of things. It was another course where you have a choice to go straight. You can go to the right or you can go to the left. I chose not to be an academic student. I was a good student, but I also wanted to have experiences and be exposed to new things. And one of my experiences that I selected in high school was I was part of the DECA Club. And I can't tell you what that means right now because it's been a long time ago. But when I decided to choose this particular club, it had some other things attached to it. It had how to get a job and keep a job. It had working at the school store. It had all of these different dynamics of life lessons that prepared me to do something new and something different. Up to that time, I had aspirations of being a doctor. And while I was in high school, and I still had that decision up until ninth grade, I was a part of our medical club, which was another club in high school, where, you learn the basics around health and wellness. You learn the basics around taking vitals and things like that, and kind of how your body operates and how the medical system operated. But in that time, and after I had finished with my first year, which was medical club, my mother was a nurse, and she was she had been, most of my life, my mom had been studying. She had moved up the ladder from a nurse's aide all the way up to a registered nurse. And so when she was studying the human body, and she would bring animal parts, eyes and hearts and brains and things like that home to study and explore, I would be right there with her. I was so super fascinated. I wasn't turned off by the blood. I wasn't turned off by seeing organs and all those kind of things. I wasn't turned off by any of that because I knew it was a part of the process. So I knew that early. And so when I got to high school, to the medical club, I was really excited about exploring this whole career as a doctor. But at the end of that year, my mom, as a nurse, lost her first patient. And she was sad, but because my mom would come home and tell me stories about what it was like being a nurse, and, all the intricate things that she was learning and she was practicing, and she was always connected to the people, because that was the type of nurse that she was taught to be, is to always think about the patients. Your patients are people still. They're not just people sitting in beds. They're actually people with families and life and history and stories. And so my mother's teachers always talked to her about making sure to remember that your patients are people, because you have a tendency to put a label on somebody, and you treat them according to the label. And a lot of us still do that even today. If they say that you're alcoholic, then that's the label that we treat you under, is your alcoholic label. If it's a teacher, then that's the teacher label we treat you under as a teacher. I mean, so a lot of times I found on my journey that the labels or the titles that we have sometimes is reflective of how we treat a particular person. Like, you might think that they're supposed to be very, very smart, or you think that somebody works at a bank is supposed to be very, very wealthy, or at least be able to manage money and have a certain type of income. And it's not to say that that's not true or is true. It is based on it's not necessarily based on real substance, is what I'm getting to. And so we have to make sure that we're treating people respectfully, regardless of what their profession is, regardless of what their situation is. Everybody deserves a respect. And so I think that's important. But I think we can also get away from that lesson, that life lesson. So anyway, after my mom lost her patient, I recognized that the medical field was not for me. Or I thought that the medical field was not for me, because it took me months to get over the loss of her patient. I didn't know the person. I knew the person through the stories and the circumstances that my mom shared, because the patient was getting well and getting better, and they had a major setback and died from complications. And I could not wrap my head around that. I could not wrap my head around, somebody comes to the hospital for help, and you start to help them, and they have such a major setback, or something, deters them, and they end up dying. And she talked about, talking to the person's family, and she had patients that didn't have family, and, people dying alone, those kinds of, I could not, I did not want to go into that profession after that, because I didn't realize in all the life aspect of it that death is also a part of it, and it just trapped me in that space. And so, and that's important to me because it feeds into later on in my own life when I decided to take my life. Some of the things that came back as a result of that after the fact. And so that was a pivotal moment on my meridian path. It was a choice to not go into the medical field because I could not process at the time. I didn't have the maturity or the tools to process death. And so I bypassed that, and I decided to go left and go into advertising, because in that DECA club, another thing that I was exposed to was we had competition. So it's citywide competitions. And in this particular citywide competition, I got assigned to an advertising group. And I had never, I always loved commercials, but that was never my intention for profession. So I never looked at it that way. I just love commercials. But when we went to a competition, and because I had withdrawn myself from the whole medical field as a career pathway for me, I started to look at advertising because I was put into a group because they didn't have any more groups left. I got assigned to advertising. And so I took the assignment and I went along with all the requirements and things that you had to participate in this citywide competition for advertising. And I was really excited about participating. I came in third place in the city and I didn't even have an interest in it. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe this is something I can do. I always like commercials. And so I started to shape my career pathway around advertising. And so as I went into that, I got deeper into it. I started doing more research. I spent a lot of time in the library. I spent a lot of time looking at even the TV shows that had people who were in advertising. One of the ones that had somebody in advertising was Bewitched. So if you ever watched Bewitched, her husband, Darren, he was an advertising exec. And so I don't know if you guys remember that movie, but that was really one of my favorites. It was Bewitched. Which is another ironic movie that kind of opened me up to metaphysics. So, but that's where it came from for me and my pursuit of a career pathway in advertising and marketing. And so from there, the next major thing that happened to me on my journey, and this again, I'm still in high school. These are the spaces where my ideas and my journey were being shaped and formed, so that when I became an adult and I started to make adult decisions, that these were the roads that I was taking. This was the path that I was on. So once I got on the path of advertising, I was also still very involved. And as I continued to move through high school, I was always concerned with how we make a difference and what our class was going to be like. And so I decided to run for class president. So this was about my junior year, and I decided to run for class president. And for that year and for my senior year, my plan was to be class president for my junior year and my senior year. And so it was my competition for president was another friend of mine, and we had made a pact. And it's so funny because I recently found this written agreement that we made that if he won, he was going to follow the same path that I was going to follow. And if I won, I was going to follow the same path. So we had kind of integrated our ideas so that we would make sure that the ideas would move forward with either him or me. And so, which I thought was pretty, and that, of course, I negotiated that with him, that agreement with him. So I won the presidency for the junior year and he won for the senior year. And so some things were kept, some things not so much, but we still had a really fruitful junior year and senior year because of both of our inputs. And so that was important because also that year I had been working with our his name was Mr. Stevens. He was our history teacher, and he was very much connected. I didn't know he was so connected outside of our school because, you know, he was kind of a different type of person. So, you know, a lot of kids made fun of him. He was always nice to everybody. He was different. And, you know, I really could identify with people who were different. Like, that was my crew, people who were different. And so I was working. He had asked me if I wanted to do any more community service and do more community service outside of the school. And I said, absolutely. And so one of the things that I was doing was I was a member of the Crockett Youth Caucus, and Congressman Crockett at the time was one of the congressmen in Michigan that was really concerned about and advocated for students. And so I was part of that caucus. So we had discussion groups, we had demonstrations, we had all kinds of exposure around politics and political rallying and understanding how to get bills and laws passed. Like, we were introduced to those things. And so, again, it was a door that opened for me because of a choice I made to be involved, and then to be valued by one of our staff in high school, which was Mr. Stevens. He saw what I was doing in school. He saw what I was doing outside of school, and he thought that would be a good fit for me. So I participated in that, and it led me, that journey opened another door for me, because I did two things that were very important to me at that time. I was a part of Jesse Jackson's campaign to become president. I sent out and passed out flyers and leaflets. I told my side of the story about what I learned about him and what he was trying to do. And I was really encouraged by the first Black president, who I thought was going to be Jesse Jackson. And so, working really hard to have a sense of identity and a high position like that. And so this was in I don't know, mid 80s, somewhere in there. And it also earned me my work, not only on his campaign, but my work in community and my work with Congressman Crockett, George Crockett at the time, allowed me to earn a scholarship for college. And why that was important to my family is because there were 4 of us in college at that time. I had an older brother who had graduated from high school. So my oldest brother and I are 10 years apart. My youngest sister and I are 10 years apart. So I'm actually the middle child. So I'm in the first group. We call it the first group and the second group of the kids because it's 7 of us. And so, it's 7 biological and 1, I have an adopted cousin that's a sister too. So, but my older siblings were off at college and in life. And so my parents still had children at home. And so I knew it was going to be difficult for me to go to college. Even though my parents insisted that all of us have an opportunity to go to college, it was not resources for everybody to have to go to college. So my parents were willing to sacrifice and take out loans, the parent loans that you could take out. And they were maximizing just to make sure that all of us had the opportunity to go to college. Now, my brother earned a scholarship for football. My sister, she didn't earn a scholarship, so she still needed support. And then here I am, the next one, the number 4 coming up. And so that financial strain, having children at home and still young children, then having older children in college, plus my scholarship was to Tennessee State. So it wasn't a local, it wasn't in state, and it wasn't local. So that took me on a different pathway than it took my other siblings. Both my siblings were still in Michigan. And so, so that was a really, that was an intense pivot for me. It was another space where my identity was being formed, where my ideas about life were being shaped. And again, because I was already a purpose-driven, community and servant-driven person, and that from my backstory. So moving into Tennessee State was huge. It was huge. Moving to Tennessee itself was huge. I had been, I've been places independently, but I had not been to a place outside of the state where it was just me. And so as I was taking this journey, there was a lot to learn. There was a lot to learn about taking care of yourself. And because I started off, of course, as a freshman, there was a freshman dormitory. And so in that freshman dormitory and this was a female dormitory, but it was women from all over the country. And it really, to know that many people around the country, to meet that many people and to go through this journey together was amazing. It was amazing. So if you've ever been to camp and you had a chance to meet people from different places, the ability to connect with people and to connect with different cultures. And I don't mean just ethnicities. I mean a different culture, a different home culture. People from the South, and how the people from the South were so much different from the people I knew in Detroit, and people from Chicago, and people from Wisconsin. Like it was a melting pot of not only ethnicity, because it was a historically Black college, especially at that time, but also of culture, because people bring their culture with them. That's either their home culture, their community culture, their city culture. Even, when you're a fan of your sports teams, you take all that culture too when you go into a new space. So it was really a dynamic time in my life. Again, it was another kind of a extension of the next step in your journey, the extension of the path that you're taking. So your meridian path, at this point, I'm making decisions in my life, some most independent of my parents, and of the decisions that had to be weighed with some integrity, that had to be weighed with some maturity. And then because this was all new. This was all new, taking care of yourself, buying your own groceries, nobody telling you when to get up and go to bed, or don't go out, or don't do this. It was nobody telling you that. You had to be self-regulated. And so because I believe that I had a strong upbringing and I was already in leadership and servant leadership, I felt prepared to take that next step. But while I was there were so many young women that didn't make the best choices for them, of who they got involved with. Some got pregnant and had to drop out of school. Some, one or two got assaulted because they made the wrong choices and going with somebody that they didn't know, and, and getting drunk or high and all those things because they didn't have those experiences before, because it was always somebody telling them, guiding them, protecting them around their choices. But you didn't have that. You might have had a friend that said, that's probably not a good idea. And for me, I was big on, even in my friendships, that you don't go anywhere by yourself, and you certainly don't leave the crew. And so I knew that early on, just with my friendships in high school, and, the people who you would hang out with, you had to have, a certain standard, and you had to have rules and guidelines to guide you. So when you go off to an opportunity like that, and this next chapter in your life, you may or may not be prepared for that. So there were so many who were not prepared, and who, whose choices led them down a different path. And I'm not talking about judgment. I'm not talking about good, bad, right, or wrong. That's what we do when we judge. We give it a label of good, bad, right, or wrong. I'm talking about where your path leads you, where your choices lead you, and how important it is, one, to know that, but also to reflect on it, because you can't do and go wrong. Either you're going to go the long way around, which is all the circumstances that it includes, or you're going to go the short way. Your sense of discernment, your values, your goals, all of those things kind of help direct you to the short way, but there's not a wrong or right way to get to where you're supposed to be. The purpose, our purpose is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You were born to be and to do who you were born to be and what to do. And so we have to be mindful that there was already a blueprint. There's a blueprint, but there's places where, it may be a wall here, but you can erase that by a decision or choice. Or where there is no wall, we can place a wall there by drawing it in with our choices and our decisions. So if you are still here and you have breath and life in your body, you really don't have control over when your time is up. That's already governed. You can execute a time where it speeds it up, but it's all of it is in divine order. It may not be divine for us who have to look at the consequences of the choices that you make or I make, or the choices that are made for us. But the best that we can do is follow our purpose. Know that you have one, and then I would like people to reflect on that so that they know. And I'm going back and telling you this because in one of our upcoming episodes, we're going to talk about why these choices that I made a difference and how it helped to direct me to where I am now and where I am going, and my purpose-driven work, and why I have been selected to do some things that you may not have had opportunities to do, may not have had opportunities to see. So your purpose is also a part of your backstory, your family culture. And I talked to you earlier about how my parents supported my choice with just taking a stand about cutting down trees in my community. How they supported that when I wanted to go to college. And at first we didn't have an option. I didn't have options because I didn't have that scholarship. But because of the choices that I had made up to that point, I was able to earn a scholarship. That changed the trajectory of my life. I'm not sure which way I would have gone after that. My parents were willing to sacrifice whatever they needed to do to make sure that we got to college, and I got to college. But I can't tell you the path, if there was going to be a path, this straight path to get there. It was already a path of a choice, a series of choices that opened the door for that scholarship for me to take that next step and to go to Tennessee State. And because I went to Tennessee State, I was equipped with things and experiences that are invaluable to who I am today. Because once I got to Tennessee State, because I'm involved, because I believe in being a part of the culture that is being shaped around me, I want to be a part of that. And so I participated at Tennessee State as a Tigerette, which was the dancers for the basketball team. I participated in the yearbook, and I became the editor of the yearbook after putting in my 3 years as a yearbook editor. I became the editor for the 4th year. So I did a number of things leading up to that point, but I earned my space, and I earned the opportunity to be the editor, which was, again, another scholarship that I was able to earn to keep me in school. And so from there, and I believe that I was making a difference, even capturing the moments and capturing the stories of the university at that time as a part of the team, the yearbook team, because it's a really important document, because it documents the history of the years that I was a part of it. And so as we continue to move forward, because I was that editor, I had opportunities to go to events and be exposed to information and people that I would not otherwise have been exposed to. Now, while I was in college, because I had other siblings that were in school, I worked a number of jobs. Not only was I working at the yearbook, I worked at a pizza restaurant, I worked at Target, I worked at the library, I worked all of those other jobs, plus, work study, plus work study. So I was generating extra income to be able to send to my siblings, because I had a sister, I had a brother, and I had younger siblings coming up under me that were in middle school and going into high school. And so I needed to be able to help support my family so that we could at least have the things that we needed. Even if you may not have had what you wanted, you had the things that you needed. So, and I knew my parents didn't have the resources to send money. And so I asked, I also had a couple of side hustles. I had one side hustle with my bubblegum machine. I made about $35 a month on my bubblegum machine. I made about $20 every 2 weeks because I sold popcorn and I rented my popcorn popper. So that was another side hustle. That was the money that I used, me and my roommate used to just kind of get around, to be able to get something. It was, that's funny. Anyway, so that's a whole nother show, college stories, Black college stories. But the point was I had to be enterprising. So you had to learn how to make things work. But again, it wasn't always just about me. I had to survive. I had to produce because I had other siblings that also had needs and resources that they needed where they were back in Michigan, and my younger siblings. So I was so grateful to my parents for making a sacrifice. Like, they had to drive me down, and all the things that I had to have for school, they had to drive me down and do that, and drive back. And so after that, I had to fly back and forth because my parents couldn't just, take the 8-9 hour drive back and forth. And so I had to fly sometimes in the midst of everything else that was going on. So my time home became less and less, and it was just Christmas was the time I would come and visit. And so, but it helped me to learn about being independent. I had to get to the airport. I had to book my flights. I had to do all those types of things. And so it allowed me to have a little bit more knowledge about how to navigate. I learned how to take the bus there. It was still intimidating because I really didn't take the bus very much in Detroit. So, but now I'm in college, I had to take the bus to the market. Like, it was really, I had to get to work until I was able to get a car. And so I had my first car when I was in college. If anybody knows anything about this car, because I never saw it before, I've never seen it after. It was a Dodge Turismo. It looked like a little Charger. It was not a cute car, but it was sufficient to get me from Tennessee back to Michigan. And so it was part of the process and the challenge of trying to find your foot as an adult. And again, those choices that I made, there were lots of choices that I made that helped me navigate the space. All of them were not good choices, let me tell you. All of them came with either a consequence or a reward. And I had the experience of both. But even those things helped to shape who I was and who I was becoming. And so as I continued my journey, I had some other opportunities. So probably my first 2 years, this is probably around job number, maybe by that time I got to college, I probably had 15 jobs. So between my paper route up to, my college experiences, I probably had about 15 jobs because I worked multiple jobs. But because I worked multiple jobs and because I had such a variety of experiences, it kept positioning me for new opportunities. It positioned me for new opportunities because I worked with Crockett. Because I worked with Congressman Crockett, because I had that experience. I also was a debutante when I was in high school with the Rainbow Cotillion, which was initiated by Dot Wilson. So he introduced a lot of young women into that type of culture where you could navigate and you could be in different places and be comfortable kind of in the skin that you're in. That was a profound investment of time. It was the first time I had a formal dress with a hoop skirt. I don't know if you guys know about hoop skirts. That means it makes your dress really full, and if you sit down, it'll pop up, that kind of dress, right? So it was the first time that I was able to dress in a formal way. At the time I had a Jerry curl, so you know what time we're talking, what time period we're talking. So I'm not going to make any jokes about the Jerry curl because, of course, I was one that had it for a while. But the doors that were open at that time, because of the choices that I made. I want you to kind of see the kinds of things that helped shape my journey so that you understand as when I talk about some of the things in the upcoming episodes, how those things were in preparation, help me to prepare for these next steps and the next journeys. So my 15 jobs at this time. So I'm exposed to, you can say door-to-door sales. I'm exposed to, I worked in retail. I worked at Kmart. I worked at Target. I worked at, of course, I mentioned I worked at the library. I worked in publishing, which is what the yearbook was. Worked in publishing and publications. Right. So you kind of see you may have some insight into some of the things why I write books now and I help other people produce books. I started off with graphic design. I taught myself how to do web design because I needed to help create websites for certain organizations and businesses I was working for. So I was self-taught. And all of these things helped to shape why I became a personal change coach. why I have so much information and knowledge and resources. But at the heart of all of this, which is in our next episode, that you will hear more about the why, and you hear more about the intricate things that help to build out who I am in my journey. And so I wanted to make sure that I had a chance to introduce to you that, one, God can use a child. And I was one that was used to be able to open the door along the course of just 18 years. The doors that were able to open because I was able to use my voice and understand that how important it was to connect with the trees, and but more important, to have a voice, to be able to say yes or no, or this is not acceptable, or this is acceptable. To take a stand, even if you might be standing by yourself, to take a stand for what's right and what's good. So that's kind of where it came from for me. It came from me being able to take a stand. It came from making choices along my path that took me either right or took me left, and then following that path through. So the last path I mentioned was going into advertising. And so because I wanted to go into advertising, and Tennessee State did not offer advertising, they offered marketing and they offered mass communications. So I went into mass communications and marketing. And because I went to mass communications, I was a host of my own show. I had a radio show, kind of an after-hour show where I was a DJ, and it was all love songs. So if you know me, I'm still in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s love songs. So I still play those to this day. But it exposed me to being in let me step back. So when I was in high school, I was also a teen reporter for WJLB. So that exposed me to being in a radio station. That exposed me to being able to make choices about music and how the internal systems of a radio station operate and work. So when I went to college and I got into mass communications, that's one of the reasons why I was able to have my own radio show, because I already had the exposure. I knew how to find the top picks. I knew how to actually navigate all the systems in the radio station. So it opened the door for me to be able to have my own radio station, my own radio show, and to navigate the radio station there. I also learned how to use all phases of TV cameras, of editing suite, of I had to produce my own shows. I had to produce my own news shows. I had to do all of that in that. I also had to take journalism. So I learned how to write for a newspaper. I know to write articles. I learned how to do all those things. All of those things are still a part of what I do even today, even being on this podcast. The technology is much different. much, much, much different. Of course, it would be archaic then, but the understanding of the process is still the same. And so that's a really important. I wanted you to see the steps that are behind who you get to know today. It's important to know that there was a process. It wasn't just an arrival. I'm not just arriving on the scene. It's because I put in the work and I put in the purpose work, and I've been focused and driven about who I am, about my identity, and about healing my old wounds, and how important that is to know, and the things to know about you. So my challenge to you between now and our next episode is to go back and look at your meridian path. Where are those spaces where you made choices that started to open up new doors for you? And a lot of it, again, was in my backstory, was in my childhood. So under 18 years old, I started to find out who I was and shape my identity by the experiences and choices that I made. So I want you to do the same. So in our next episode, next Monday, I really would like for you to start digging deeper. And if you don't have a journal, I need for you to get a journal. I need for you to journal parallel to what I'm sharing with you, because somewhere our paths are going to cross, or we couldn't connect in the first place. So because we're connecting, because you're a part of this process now too, I want you to journal. I want you to go back and look at your reflections so that you can get what you need to help you move through this process. So I'm so excited to be here with you. I'm so excited to share this next series with you about lessons of the journey and where the journey began. And so I'm excited for you, because I want you to see your backstory too. I want you to know how your identity and your journey has been shaped in the same process. So thank you for listening in. This is Heather Heteru, your personal change coach and village elder, and I want you to stay clear. Thank you.